Thank you all for attending this evening. This is a webinar targeted mainly at tutors to help you get up and running with Bramble and talk you through the various features and functionality. By way of introduction, I'm Will. I'm one of the founders of Bramble, and Scott is our marketing and success manager and a very experienced tutor himself. Now I'm going to turn my camera off and start sharing my screen to just talk you through a few slides and then show you the Bramble user area and jump into a session. So just to start with a little bit of context, I guess, in terms of where Bramble's being used and how it's being used. We always like to look at the last month and see what's been going on. I mean, admittedly, this chart is already well out of date because I think April has already surpassed March in terms of hours of use. But hopefully, you know, what this gives you a sense of is the global reach, the global appeal of online tutoring, and also hopefully helps put some of you who are perhaps new to this and a bit unsure about, you know, can I do this? Can I get my head around the technology? Pretty much wherever you are in the world, there's someone in your position who has managed to do that in the last month or so, you know, to the tune of not far off 30,000 hours worth of tutoring delivered in over or nearly 100 countries last month. So whoever you are, wherever you are, you can do this. In terms of the structure of today's session, as I alluded to earlier, we'll start by talking about the setup, then get into the live sessions, and I'll show you how the session app works, which is what you use to deliver your live tutoring through Bramble. And then I'll finish by talking about the recording and search functionality, something that we think is really key to online tutoring and really elevating the experience above and beyond what's possible in the analog setting. I know we're all being forced into tutoring online at the moment, but I think it's nice to have a positive message to be able to convey to your students and their parents. And I think recording and search is a very positive message in that all the stuff you're teaching them is going to build this fantastic revision library for students to come back to again and again. So we'll get on towards the end of this session, about an hour or so in. So before we get started with the walkthrough, I just wanted to flag our help center, which we've recently updated. So this contains everything you need to know to get started. Pretty much everything I'm going to talk to you about today is covered in these help center articles, from creating a room to setting up your first session, sharing resources, accessing your recording, and even some troubleshooting tips if you are running into some issues with your internet connection or your voice or video or anything like that. So if you do have any questions, do head to the help center and it should be able to help you out more often than not. Okay, so getting started with the walkthrough. Hopefully at this stage, you've all already registered an account. That's how you heard about this webinar. If you haven't got to that point yet and you are an independent tutor, then head to my.bramble.io and register an account there. If you're a tutor working with an organization, wait to receive an invite from that organization to register an account with them. If you haven't received that yet, chase whoever it is you speak to at that organization. But I'm guessing most of you have got to the point of setting up your account. That's why you're on the webinar. So if I click this icon in the top left here, it's going to show me my menu options. And what we're going to look at first is the Rooms tab. So this is where you can see a list of all of the rooms you've created in Bramble. So a room is a unique web link at which your session takes place. So this example here at the top, tutors.bramble.io/will-spacetime-test5309 is a link that I would send to my student. We both click on the link and we join the same room to have a session together. Really very, very straightforward, one-click access across devices, no need to download or install anything. You can get going straight away. So that's how Rooms works. Obviously, when you first start, you're not going to have any rooms. So what you're going to need to do is create a new room. If I click on this button here, it takes me into the room creation flow, which you should see on screen now. Now, if you're registered with multiple organizations, you'll see this drop-down menu that will let you choose which organization you want to register your room with. If you're just registered with one organization, or you're just registered as an independent tutor, you'll skip that step, so you don't have to worry about it. Then we ask you to choose your room name. Simply input your student's name and click next, and that will generate a room for you to use with that student. One thing we get asked quite often is whether you should have one room that you use with all of your students, or whether you should have multiple rooms. So I put together this handy sort of infographic the other day, which hopefully explains what those different scenarios look like. So at the top here, we have a situation where a tutor is just using one room. They've named the room after themselves, and they've sent that room link, tutor.bramble.io/Tim1234, to their 3 students. So whenever they have a session with one of those students, the student just follows that link, joins the session, and they're good to go. Now, the benefit of this approach is that it's a bit easier to keep track of rooms, and that is indeed what we used to recommend, is just using one room per tutor. The downside is that you do have a bit of increased risk of students clashing. That is, Amy accidentally rocking up 10 minutes early and overlapping with Ben's session. So to help combat that, we've made it very easy for you to create multiple rooms if you would like. As shown in the bottom half here, you can create a room for each student you work with, and then send each student a unique link so that only they will ever have access to that room. Obviously reduces the risk of the students clashing. Doesn't mean you have a few more rooms to keep track of, but actually the rooms page makes it fairly easy to do that. I've probably got more in here than you would have, because I've got a load of test rooms in here, but you can see as long as you name the room sensibly, it should be quite easy to keep track of which room you're using with which student. So before we jump into the session demo, is there any questions, Scott, on rooms and room creation?
How do you delete a room?
So at this stage, we haven't got particularly straightforward room deletion functionality in there. Doesn't really matter. Doesn't matter if you've got a few orphaned rooms lying around. You can just leave them in place. So we can support small groups of up to 4 students in a session. The consideration here is that every student you add increases the bandwidth and compute required for a good voice experience. If everyone's on a good connection, that's all good. One of the students has a weaker connection or a weaker device, that can cause some problems. But you should be all right up to about 4 users in a session.
Can you rename a room?
No, once it's created, it has that name. So what's your spelling first time round?
Yeah, what I've done is literally, I used to have one link per for all of my students. Now I've created a link per student, and it works really well because they all have their own unique link. When we set a time together, I just add it to my calendar, send them that link, and they just click on it, and we both connect via our devices.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, shall we jump into a session then, Scott?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Okay, so I've just copied this link here and sent it to Scott on my other screen. And then to join the session myself, I'm going to click Open Room, and it's going to load me in to the session. You can see here, tutor.bramble.io/will-spacetime-test. This first bit is my room link. This is what I sent to Scott. The bit you can see afterwards is just setting my email address, because it knows where I'm coming from. It knows that it's me, so it's saying set the email as will@bramble.io. So then when we connect to a session, before we let you in, we check your audio hardware. We check your speakers are working, and we check your microphones are working, so that when you get into the session, you know that those things are working for yourself and your student, to hopefully reduce the can you hear me start to a session. So we start by testing the speakers. If I click this button here, then what that's going to do is present me with 3 animals, and what you guys won't be getting is I've got an animal sound playing in my ear, a quacking duck. So I just choose the duck. That's the sound that I can hear. Next, it asks me for access to my microphone. I click allow up there, and then you can see this circle in the middle illuminate because access to my microphone has been allowed. If I click Get Started, that will load us into the session. Now you'll notice I've got a message here that says I need to enable camera for snapshot or live video to work. And this is because I'm in a guest tab, and by default, it turned off my camera. So I'm just going to quickly enable this up here where it says camera blocked. I'm going to choose always allow access to camera and microphone. I'm going to click done, and I'm going to reload the page, come back in quickly, and my camera will now be working correctly. And you can see Scott's just joined here as well. So now we're both in the room together. We can hear each other. Scott has actually joined without voice because otherwise we'd be hearing each other through both the webinar and through Bramble. But typically we'd be able to talk to each other, share resources, draw on screen, and have our session. So before we get into the ins and outs of how the session app works, what I thought I'd do is just cover the kind of equipment setup side of things, because it's the first question that we often get asked by a number of tutors. So in terms of the basic kit you need, the bare minimum, the good news is if you're on this webinar, you've got the basics in place. You need a computer, a microphone, and Google Chrome. Obviously, you need the computer for the session to take place. You need the microphone to be able to talk to each other, and you need to be using Google Chrome because a number of the more cutting-edge features we use are only fully supported in Chrome. The only exception to this Chrome rule, which we will repeat later, is if you are on an iPad or iPhone, any iOS device, you need to be using Safari rather than Chrome. And also to say, this next section that I'm going to whiz through is covered in great detail on our blog. Scott put together a brilliant comprehensive guide, looked at about 20 different bits of kit, wrote up what you need to deliver a great online tutoring session at various different price points. So if you'd want more information on any of this, please do head to the blog and have a read of that article there. So those are the basics you need. But the next question we get asked is, okay, that's the basics. I've got my laptop, I've got my microphone set up, I'm ready to go. Is there anything I can add to my setup to improve the experience I'm able to offer to my students? And a big focus here is tools that you can use to make it a little bit easier for you to draw on screen. Bramble is very much based on this kind of pen and paper, this shared notebook. You know, we're trying to recreate that stack of papers that you have when you're sat next to your student and you're scribbling on stuff, be it a past paper or a blank page or a diagram or whatever it is. So obviously that the pen tool, your ability to draw stuff on screen, is quite important in recreating that experience of being sat next door to each other. Now, the good news is that even adding something as simple as a mouse can make quite a big difference. In fact, all I'm using at the moment is a mouse on my computer, and I'm able to draw stuff out reasonably well. It's not the prettiest or the quickest, but it does a pretty good job, and is a lot easier than just using a trackpad on my laptop. Moving up, the drawing tablets are perhaps the best value for money and impact in terms of enhancing your ability to draw on Bramble. So these drawing tablets are little USB devices that plug into your computer and then make it much easier for you to draw on the page. And the one we're actually recommending at the moment is a new one called the Wacom One. You should be able to find it for about $50 or £50, depending on what part of the world you're in, or the sort of there or thereabouts. So if you are interested in a drawing tablet, do look up the Wacom One. As I say, you know, an amount of money, a reasonable investment, but one that pays for itself pretty quickly in terms of the ability it has to enhance your sessions, and you know, pays for itself within a few tutoring lessons if you do find yourself doing a lot of online tutoring and want to add something that makes drawing a bit easier. So as we move up the scale here, there's a bit of a divide here. We make quite a big jump, both in terms of impact, but also price. So these devices, you know, iPad, Android tablets, or touchscreen laptops, are really a case of us saying, if you already have access to one of these, then definitely use them in your Bramble session. But if you don't worry about it too much. You don't need to go out and spend £300 on an iPad to deliver a really good online tutoring session. You can do it very well, even with just a computer and a mouse, even better with one of those drawing tablets. But if you do have an iPad, an Android tablet, or a touch screen, then chuck those into the mix, because they are the kind of pinnacle of the drawing experience, because you're drawing directly onto the screen. The reason we say a touchscreen laptop is the best possible solution here is that it offers the best all-round experience, because you're able to run fully fledged desktop browser, you're able to run the full version of Chrome, then you get the most reliable voice experience, the most reliable recording experience with a touch screen added. If you are using an iPad or Android tablet, then we generally recommend, if possible, that you run that alongside your computer. The reason being that your computer will handle voice much better than an iPad or Android tablet will. So the iPad or Android tablet are great for drawing things out in the notebook. So if you have access to those devices, make the most of them, but don't feel that they're a sort of necessity for delivering your online tutoring. When I looked at the stats from last year, about 80% of users were just on a laptop with nothing else fancy plugged in or involved. So whatever you have available to you, you should be able to have a decent crack at it.
Can you use a phone to draw?
Yeah, absolutely. So the way we've tried to design it really is to make the most of whatever device people have available to them. That means we work across all devices, from Android phones and iPhones up to iPads, all the way through to laptops and desktop devices. All of those devices, you can access a Bramble session with a single click. You'll be in there with live voice, with the notebook and everything else. Students have access to a laptop as well as a phone, then we recommend they use the laptop. Generally speaking, you want to be using the largest screen device you can. It's just easier to see stuff and generally offers better performance as well. But if a student only has access to a phone, they can still have a full session. You might have to modify it a little bit in that they are probably more in receive mode, in that they can't draw on screen that easily. But it's a damn sight better than nothing for them to still be able to have that tutoring session delivered to them through their phone. So if you have to, you can, but where possible, we recommend kind of using the biggest screen device you can.
Yeah, and it's not really for us to hand out any kind of business-related device, but I'm just saying, me as a tutor, because I had a tutoring business, I was able to get equipment such as graphics tablets, and of course, it's a business expense, and it's all very tax deductible. But obviously, that's up to you if you run your own tutoring business, and whether you're self-employed or whatever your situation is. So that can be a situation. Absolutely.
If you're earning your living from online tutoring, then investing in one of these devices makes a lot of sense. The top device we would recommend is a Windows Surface Pro. That's what Scott's got, and it's sufficient for all your day-to-day computing and the best possible device you can have for delivering online tutoring. So if you're wanting the cream of the crop, that's what to go for. But equally, if you're just on a Chromebook or your existing laptop, you'll be fine. Okay, then, any more questions about devices, Scott, before we get into the session app in earnest?
So I think some people are slightly unsure as to maybe how you would use two devices. Like if you've got a drawing tablet, you connect it. If you've got an iPad, you connect it. You would basically use the same link, the same room link on both devices. You would typically connect to one using voice and one without voice. Is that correct, Rob?
Yes, absolutely. The way it works is you just go to the exact same link. So I would open up tutor.bramble.io/wheelspacetime, whatever, on my iPad, load in. I choose to join without voice on my iPad because I've got voice on my laptop and I don't want voice on two devices because it leads to feedback. And then I'm straight into the session. Everything that I do on the iPad, I can see on the laptop and vice versa. And actually, it really gives you a sense of just how quickly we're transmitting drawing when you have two devices connected at the same time, because you can see it with your own eyes rather than at the remove of another person.
And I'm currently on two devices now. I'm on my PC. for the big screen, and I'm also on my Windows Surface Pro, you know, to draw on basically.
Okay, then let's get into the session app. So the way we've designed the session app, as I alluded to earlier, is very much around this paradigm of a shared notebook, you know, a stack of papers that you can work through as your session progresses. We move through the notebook using the backwards and forwards arrows, so I can go back to review something we've looked at already, or if I ever want to start a fresh page, I just click the forward arrow and we've got a nice fresh page to work with. A few key things to note: tutor and student are always kept quite literally on the same page. If Scott were to change page now, you would see it change on my screen as well as on his, so that we always stay in sync. And on that as well, that's true regardless of what size device we're on. So if Scott's on a much bigger screen than I am, we can still both see the full page of the notebook. Even if I was just in on my phone, I'd be able to see the four corners of the notebook. So there's no risk of Scott working on something over in one corner and me not being able to see it because I'm on a smaller screen. Everyone is always seeing the same thing in the notebook. Everything in the notebook is seen by both users pretty much instantly. So then in terms of the tools we've built in the notebook, the good news is that they're very simple, very easy to use. And really it boils down to three key tools. You've got the ability to draw, you've got the ability to type, and you've got the ability to share resources. And with those three tools, you can teach just about anything in a variety of different ways. So if we start with the pen tool, you can see down here, the pen icon showing me that I currently have the pen selected, enabling me to draw on screen. Scott can be drawing on screen at the same time as I am. And as soon as either of us starts drawing, the other one can see exactly what they're writing. There's no delay. If I start circling Scott, he can see that immediately on his screen rather than when I lift up. This side of things might not necessarily come through so well on the webinar because we've got a kind of screen sharing layer in the way, but hopefully when you come into your Bramble sessions, you'll appreciate just how fast it is in that regard. You know, if I start writing out 1, 2, 3, 4, Scott's seeing that instantly on his side without any sort of delay, which might seem a weird thing for us to have obsessed over, but actually we think is really critical to the flow of the session. You know, this needs to feel as frictionless as being sat next door to each other. So even a fraction of a second lag or me circling this and you not seeing it until I lift my pen up really leads to quite a disjointed experience and can disrupt the flow of a lesson. You know, one of the things we measure on this front in Bramble is the duration of lessons, and we see that the majority of sessions, on average, every session is at least an hour long, and a third of sessions are over 90 minutes long, which suggests people really are getting into this flow, kind of forgetting that the tools are even there, which is sort of what we're aiming for in the session app. If I click this icon again, it goes from the pen to an eraser. That enables me to rub stuff out. And if I click it once more, it'll go to the T for text, so I can type 2. And again, everything I'm typing is transmitted with each keystroke. So if Scott starts typing something now, you'll be able to see through my screen it appearing as he starts typing. And this is important on the tutor side because it means I can see if the student's struggling to spell something. And it's important on the student side because it means that if the tutor is typing out a long old block of text, the student can see that right away and read it as it comes rather than sitting there twiddling their thumbs wondering what's going on. So next to the pen, you'll see we've got the color droplet. Scott, if you come back to the pen tool as well, and we'll both select a different color. This works in much the same way, shows the currently selected color, and then we can click to cycle through the different colors available. We can use a different color each to make it easy. We can use different colors to highlight different things on the page. You know, we can use these colors however we wish to. And jumping over to the other side, we've got undo and redo, which do exactly what it says on the tin. I can easily undo everything that I've been drawing and redo it again, very, very fast. We'll often find that people end up using undo and redo more than they use the eraser, just because it is so fast and responsive. So those are the basic pen tools. You can do quite a lot just with those, especially if you have access to a touchscreen or one of those graphics tablets. You could be drawing out diagrams or graphs or writing out equations. I thought I'd just dig out a little example here to show, to give you a sense of what's possible just with the pen tools. Just an example here, looking at circle theorem in math. And you can see they've drawn out the unit circle, which I must admit I can barely remember, and then the various trigonometric functions and work through that, all just using the pen tool. But of course, when those tools really come to life is when you combine them with the ability to share resources, which is what I've been doing throughout when I've been bringing these various slides into the session. So I'll show you now how that works. And just to kind of set the scene on that, there's a number of different ways that you can share resources on Bramble, which I'm going to walk through now. So we've got the upload button, we've got the ability to drag and drop resources, we've got the ability to copy and paste any image from the internet, and then we will talk about screenshot and the flexibility and speed that gives you in terms of sharing resources. So if we start with the upload button, very straightforward and a good place to start when you're first uploading resources. I click this icon and the upload overlay appears, and I can choose to share resources from my device. That's going to open up my file explorer, and then I can go to my resources folder and choose any resource I want to upload to the notebook. And there we are, straight into the session. We can start adding our annotations on top of the question here, highlighting various different bits. Scott can be working through it whilst I guide him through it. Always good to do a bit of live math under pressure. I didn't even warn you about that today either.
No, you didn't.
So that's how the upload button works. That lets you upload any image or PDF from your computer into Bramble. The other way of getting images and PDF into Bramble is drag and drop. So if I pull this window over here, you should be able to see my collection of resources here. And rather than using the upload button, I can simply drop this image straight into the notebook, and then it's shared immediately, and we're able again to add our annotations. Very fast. Once again, you'll get a sense of this better when you have a session, but image uploading is pretty much instant. PDF uploading, you can upload very large PDFs very quickly. In fact, the 144 pages of Hamlet upload to Bramble in 3 seconds with a page on each page of the notebook. So in terms of uploading other types of documents to Bramble, we often get asked, can I upload Word documents or PowerPoint documents? The answer is yes. All you need to do is export them to PDF, and then you can upload the PDF into the notebook. So I've got some PDFs now, which I can show you actually if I dig these out. Here I've got a GCSE maths paper that I'm going to drag and drop into the notebook. And what that has done is load a page from each page of this PDF into the notebook. So we're now able to work through this entire PDF and the entire past paper, either by adding our answers in line or by jumping over here, doing the sums over here, and adding our answers over to the side. So you can see now we've got the whole PDF in here. We can work through it in this session or over a number of sessions, or jump to a specific page that we want to work on. Obviously, if you export a PowerPoint to PDF, that comes in a different orientation, so you'll have the slides filling the whole screen. Now, what we'll often get asked is, okay, that's great to be able to bring the whole PDF in so quickly. But what I really want to do is focus in on a particular question. I want this to be bigger. How do I do that? And that's where screenshot comes in. So actually in the process of putting together a video that shows you how this works, but given that we're on the webinar, I can show you it now live. So if we just move on to a fresh page, what I'm going to do is open up the PDF on my computer, pull it over here. You should hopefully all be able to see that PDF is now on my screen. And now I'm going to use a screenshot just to grab this section of the question so that it appears much bigger in the notebook. If you're on a Windows device, then to access screenshot, what you need to do is open up the start menu and look for the snipping tool, or press Windows Shift S to access it via a keyboard shortcut. And then you want to select the rectangular snip tool, which will enable you to grab a specific section of your screen and load that into the notebook. On Mac, all I have to do is press Command, Control, Shift, and 4. You can see that my cursor has turned into a sort of crosshair here. And now what I'm able to do is select just this question that I want. And you can see the grayed out box here shows the area I selected. Click and drag and then let go. That then copies this onto my clipboard. I come back into Bramble and I'm going to use Command V or Control V to paste it into the notebook. And now we have a much larger version of this math question than we had on the previous page. So if you feel like you need to enlarge a question, a section from any type of resource, then screenshot is the best way to do that. Just a bit of a caveat at this stage, it's not all maths and science, I promise. Just something that we're more familiar with ourselves, so tend to lean towards that in terms of the resources we upload. But we have plenty of tutors teaching English, humanities, languages, and all the rest. And actually, if I pull in an example here to show you that, a few different pages that hopefully cover a few different subjects. You can see at the bottom here, we've got a geography session. This is a Mandarin session over on the left. And what these pictures are all pages taken from sessions that have been delivered on Bramble. So you can see how the tools have been used to teach different things in different ways. So hopefully that helps you visualize that a little bit better. This one in the top left is one of our favorite pages ever, I think, in terms of the elegance of the drawing. This user was on an iPad, but actually I think this one in the middle is almost a better example because these were users just on their laptop, and you can see they've used resource sharing to bring a resource in. They've used the pen tool to circle stuff and draw some arrows, and then they've used text to type out some blocks of text. So we had any questions about any of those tools, Scott, before I cover webcam and export?
Can you prepare sessions beforehand?
Yes, good question. I have in fact prepared a slide talking to that very point. So let's grab this. So there's a few different ways you can prepare in advance. You can load into your room in advance of the session and chuck a load of resources in such that when you connect to it for your lesson, the resources are all there. To be honest, I increasingly find myself recommending that you don't actually even need to bother with that. The simplest solution is just to get all your resources ready on your device. That's what I've done today. I just got a folder that's named for this webinar that has the resources I know I want to bring in, and then I bring them in the session. It's so quick, it's so easy to bring them in the session that you can just do that. So all the preparation you require is just getting it ready on your device so you can drag and drop as you wish. And that just gives you a little bit more flexibility and also saves you time in terms of not having to prep stuff in advance. If you are the sort of person who wants to prep stuff in advance, then you absolutely can do. You can load your resources in advance and leave them there. Or finally, once you get a bit more familiar with how things work, you can actually load all your resources into the notebook, export the notebook, download a copy of it, and then upload that again and again whenever you need access to it. So you've got a few different options here, but to be honest, personally, I just prepare my resources in advance. So that is probably what I would recommend you do. That's as far as you need to go, really, in the most case.
Yeah, and that's another plus of having a room link per student, because of course you can go into as many different sessions as you want and pre-prepare them.
Yes.
In different rooms. A couple of questions about zooming in. I think you kind of covered that on how to take a snapshot and
yes.
and really zoom into a page. I think that's probably the best way of doing it. Is that correct, Lee?
Yeah, and to say that what you're seeing now via the webinar is smaller than you would see it when you're in a Bramble session. We take up as much screen space as we can in whichever dimension. So if I go full screen here now, you'll see that the notebook gets a little bit bigger. So that is one way of making the notebook a little bit bigger, is to increase the screen size you give it. But otherwise, if you are trying to bring a resource in and make that a bit bigger, then you can just use screenshot. I guess to kind of show an extreme example of that, I had an English paper I was looking at when I was doing this walkthrough the other day. So if I open that up here, we can get as zoomed in as a single sentence here to bring in. If I can get my screen wide enough here. So if we just want to focus on a single sentence, I'm going to use screenshot, grab that, then jump back into Bramble, paste it into the notebook. And it's much larger than it would be if I'd uploaded the whole PDF. Again, probably not as legible via the screen share layer in the webinar, but nice and crisp when you're in Bramble itself.
Yeah, exactly. You can see it very, very nicely on all of these screens. And as I said, as you mentioned, a big plus is that it auto sizes to any device.
Yes.
I think that's a huge benefit. One other question regarding, so a couple of people have mentioned that when using the font tool or the type tool, that the toolbar will freeze. That's the only tool that happens.
Yeah, so Scott, if you want to start using text, we can demonstrate what people are asking about there. So what happens when Scott starts typing is that it locks my ability to change page and undo and redo and all that sort of stuff to stop me moving into another page while Scott is trying to type something here. What's important to note is that it hasn't frozen me out of using the pen tool, which I currently have selected. I can use that as freely as I like. When Scott finishes typing, when he hits enter, I'll see this kind of border disappear, and then all my tools will unlock. So if you hit enter again, Scott, now I've got access to all those tools again, and I can move page or change color however I wish. I'm going to crack on with webcam and export. If we move onto a fresh page, the last couple of tools to cover, the info panel, export, and webcam. So this is the info panel, tells us how long this session's been going on, when we started, who's in here, and what page we're on.
Oh, Will, sorry, can I just stop you there? Something that I actually discovered today, which I think was really useful. You were talking to another person in support regarding a deaf student they had, and you were talking them through using the transcribe button. And I don't think you often bring that up. And I think that's a really huge benefit, particularly for people who maybe have students who are hard of hearing or for any other reason that they might want to actually transcribe in a live lesson.
Yes, good point. A sort of slightly experimental features down in the bottom half of the info panel here. But as Scott says, we do have the ability to transcribe what you're saying in real time. You won't be able to see this in action because Scott has joined without a voice connection. But normally if I tick this transcribe box here, what that will do is as Scott speaks, I'll see what he's saying pop up in the top left here. So as he says, if you do work with students who are hard of hearing, then that can help them follow the session a little bit easier as well. So that's the info panel. Over on the other side here, we've got the camera tools. So if I click that, you're going to see a little preview window pop up, and this gives us the option to choose which camera tool it is we want to use. So you can see we've got the option to use webcam, as you would expect, and take a snapshot, which might be a slightly more novel tool. So what Snapshot does is it uses the webcam to take a picture of whatever it is I'm holding up to the camera. So if I hold up this book and click take snapshot, it's going to take a picture of that, and then we can add our annotations to it however we wish. So if the student's got some written homework or has been scribbling something down, then they can very easily snap a quick picture of that and get it into the notebook. The other thing we can do here is, of course, enter webcam mode. Now, because Scott has joined without a media connection, he's not going to appear here. But normally you'd see him appear on the other side of the screen here. And we'll be able to see each other, have a chat. Typically, this is used at the start and end of a session to say hi and bye, whilst the majority of the session is focused on the notebook itself. And we've chosen to take this modal approach to webcam for a number of different reasons. In our early testing, a lot of tutors and students fed back that they liked the fact that when they were in the notebook, they were totally focused on what was in the notebook rather than what was going on behind them, or what they looked like, or whether they were looking at the camera, or what face they were pulling when they were struggling with Pythagoras' theorem. They like the fact that when they're in the notebook, they're in the notebook and the content is what matters. The modal approach also brings a number of benefits in terms of bandwidth. Webcam feeds use up an awful lot of bandwidth without really delivering very much information. The notebook, on the other hand, is immensely bandwidth efficient and information rich, as is your voice stream. So, especially right now, when everyone in the world is piping webcam streams and screen shares over the internet, and the internet infrastructure is creaking, to have that option to just be in the notebook with voice is going to give you much better performance. And then finally, works much better from a recording perspective to have all the action taking place in the notebook rather than via the webcam.
How many people could you potentially have on webcam at the same time, Will?
So again, you can have up to 4 users on webcam. It just further increases the kind of bandwidth and compute load on those devices. So I actually, early this afternoon, had a group session there was 3 of us in total. One of the other participants was just in on their iPad. The other one was in on their Windows device. We went in, voice was really good. We jumped into webcam, had a chat on webcam a little bit, but did notice that voice for the iPad user was a little bit crackly when we were in webcam at the same time. Jumped out, back into the notebook, crystal clear voice connection for the rest of the session. So if you do find yourself having issues with connection, then do stick to the notebook to still have a really productive session with notebook plus voice. So the last tool to cover in the session app is export. That's this little email icon here. We recommend you use this at the end of every session to clear the notebook and send yourself and the student a PDF copy of the notes. So I click continue now. What that's going to do is clear this notebook and send Scott and I a PDF copy of everything we just covered that we can then refer back to whenever we like. So that's kind of a full run through of the session app. Next, I'm going to talk about recording and search. But before I do that, Scott, are there any more questions about the session app that we should cover before moving on to recording and search?
In what file does it download? File form does it download? Can you record a full lesson with voice and download it?
So the exported notebook is a PDF. It's a kind of static file, but with all the annotations on top. The lesson recordings are saved after every session. They have everything that happened in the notebook. They have your voice. It's like reliving the session. You can't download those because we actually play them back in a special format, proprietary format we developed, which is way more efficient than video. So massively reduces file sizes, means it streams back much more efficiently, much easier to scrub through a playback, but does mean that you need to play them back through the Bramble client, which actually is an advantage really in keeping track of where those recordings end up. They can't end up on someone's device unbeknownst to you. They can only ever be viewed through Bramble by your student.
Yeah, for those asking, you can create a room and familiarize yourself with it before any sessions. You can just kind of create a room link, which you could use as a demo for yourself, and kind of play around, import things, use some of the tool functions, you can really get creative with this. It's a bit of it's a blank canvas for you to really get creative in terms of how you produce these sessions. And I found that, over time, because sometimes things take a bit of adaptation. Over time, I've really got creative with how you can use the session app, because it really is a blank canvas. So what is the notebook? We have another question.
So a notebook is what sits in the room. So this here is a fresh notebook. This is page 1. This is page 2. This is page 3. If I hit export now, it's going to clear this notebook, reset it. We've now got a totally blank notebook again. Page 1, page 2. So the notebook is kind of what you work in together. It's where you share your resources, where you add your annotations, and then whenever you export it, it's kind of when that notebook closes and a new one starts.
And for a couple of people who ask about kind of resizing and rotations and things, typically you'll do the editing to your screenshots kind of outside of the app, and then pull them in, and they auto size, which is all very quick, because this is made to be very, very quick, very simple in terms of very seamless sessions, right, Will? And so what I typically have done is create folders of different sessions I've had with students, and I've already got all of my images auto-sized as I want them, and literally I can use them over and over again. So it's a good kind of upfront asset just to be able to kind of create some of those sessions up front.
Yeah, absolutely. So throughout the session app, we really prioritize speed, be that with drawing, but also with resource upload. So when you upload a resource, we make it as big as it can be along its largest dimension. So if I upload a kind of landscape resource here, we're going to make it full width and push it to the top of the page. If I've got a portrait resource, then we're going to make it full height and push it over to the left-hand side of the page. So if you upload a kind of portrait PDF, then it's going to split the page like this. If you upload a landscape PDF, an exported PowerPoint, then it's going to fill the whole page like this. And what that means is that you just bring stuff in super fast. So, 4 math questions for us to look at. There's the first one. There's the second one. There's the third one. There's the fourth one.
Yeah.
And we're ready to go. I haven't sat there fiddling around whilst the student's wondering what's going on and broken the flow of the session.
Yeah.
It all just happens really instantly and really quickly.
And that's super important. I actually demoed an unnamed third party. The other day, someone suggested a particular one. I demoed it the other day, and I tried to pull a resource in. It took about 10 seconds to upload the resource. And I was like, what am I supposed to be? I'm twiddling my thumbs while I'm uploading this periodic table. So, while you could kind of rotate it and things, it just took an age to upload. So it's really very valuable to have that kind of speed.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to close the tab here to disconnect from our session. So to end the session, you and the student close the tab, and then when the session ends, it sends you both the recording of the session. So let's have a look at what those look like now. So if I come out of full screen mode, so it's a bit easier for you to keep track of what I'm doing. This is an example sessions page. So this is a sense of the revision library that your students are going to build up through working with you on Bramble. This is a real library. As you can see from the dates, this is pretty recent content. I've obviously changed the students' and tutors' emails, but everything else is kind of real data. Each of these cards represents a session that was delivered through Bramble. You can see we've got the vanilla information like when it was and how long it was. The icons here enable us to access the PDF or the playback of the session. But we're also doing some pretty exciting stuff in terms of analyzing the content of session recordings. So this synopsis you can see here is generated according to the most discussed terms in the session. And what's cool about that is that it gives you, at a glance, a really good sense of what's being covered in any given tutoring session. So this is the same student on the same day. They did a human biology session and a plant biology session. A couple of days before that, they were working on some maths. Before that, they were working on some chemistry. And just looking at the word clouds immediately gives you a sense, not just of the subject, but also of the topic being covered. And I think it also just provides students with a really nice sense of what they've learned and what they know. They're always anxious, thinking, oh, I don't know anything, I don't understand it, I've never been taught that. This is kind of quite a reassuring screen for them to look at and go, oh, actually, I've covered all of this with my tutor. And if I ever need to go back over it, it's all here for me. And we're hearing that that's, landing particularly well, is particularly appealing to parents and students right now. And they're in an environment where they've got no idea when the next exam is coming or what's going to be on it. Are they going to have to sit an exam in 15 months' time on stuff they're being taught today? What should they be being taught right now? All of these questions that no one really has answers to right now. To be able to say to them, look, whatever we cover in our tutoring session today is going to be fully recorded and fully searchable, so that your student can come back to it again in a week's time, a month's time, or 15 months' time, whenever they need to revisit this content. It's going to be there for them. Really seems to be helping to put parents and students' minds risk, and as I said earlier, kind of highlight a bit of a positive, a bit of a ray of sunshine amidst all of this, to be able to say, look, we're really creating value here over and above what we would have been doing if we were still having our sessions in person.
And I think also looking at the word count, don't discount the value of that, right? If you can see how active the student is in a particular session. As a student, as a tutor, I actually keep an eye on to see that I'm not kind of dominating the session too much. So, if after a session I've spoken 10,000 words and the student has spoken 3 words, I know that they've probably been a little bit passive in the session. So you can really tell a lot actually from the word counts as well as to how active the student is in the session, and whether as a tutor, maybe you need to adjust your online teaching style a little bit. I find that quite useful.
Yeah, I think the kind of insight that you can derive as a tutor from this page is really interesting, and you're right to flag it. It's got that word count comparison is an interesting one. It's not to say that one way is right or wrong. Some sessions are going to be more kind of didactic, where you're explaining a concept, but it is quite interesting to look back and reflect, as you have, Scott, and say, actually, I did want my student to be a bit more active in that session, and I maybe spoke a bit too much and could have let them speak a bit more. So I think it's really useful tool in terms of helping you develop as a tutor and improve the service you offer.
Yeah.
So we've had these session recordings in place for a little while now. And what we found is that for some students, they're brilliant. They use them loads. They'll hit play here, jump into an hour-long session recording, scrub around to find the exact bit that they want to cover. But what we also found is that for a lot of students, an hour-long recording is a bit of an intimidating prospect. What they really want to be able to do is pinpoint the exact moment they were discussing whatever it is they're stuck with. And the best way to do that is through search, giving them the ability to search all of their sessions for anything they've spoken about, typed, or shared. So we spent a lot of time last year building out a really quite cutting-edge search architecture, which enables tutors to search all of your lesson recordings at any point. So what I'm going to do now is jump into this student's library and demo to you how search works.
Just before you do, Will, sorry to cut in just at that point. Could you quickly explain for the people what is the significance of the color scheme of those sessions that you just showed?
Yes, so you'll see at the bottom corner here, we've got a subject label. So these are added by the tutor or the student. They can click in the bottom left corner and choose a subject, and then we just color code it according to the subject to kind of help with recognition and just make this screen look a little bit nicer. So I would encourage you to use that subject labeling tool to help you and your students identify different subjects, because it also just looks quite nice, which is important as well, I think. So jumping over to the library, what you can see here is the search bar. On the left-hand side is where I'm going to type in my search term. On the right-hand side are the icons telling me what modality I'm searching across. I can search across spoken words, typed text, and any shared resources. So by default, we search across all 3. And then as a student, I start typing something in, Once I've entered 3 letters, we then look up the student's library and serve them a set of highly personalized search suggestions. This is kind of what you're used to when you're searching on the internet, but fully personalized to you as the tutor or the student to the number of times any given term has come up. So in this case, we can see this student has discussed mitosis 90 times, mitochondria 25 times, mitral 6 times. So what they can do is choose one of those. We'll go for mitosis because it's the most popular. And then we try and guide that search a little bit further. We're really trying to help the student kind of narrow down what they're looking for, help them find that needle in the haystack. So once they've chosen the first term, we look at all their sessions and we say, okay, so you've talked about mitosis 90 times, but what have you talked about when you've talked about mitosis? What's been used in the same context? And it's all the usual suspects you might expect: mitosis, meiosis, mitosis cell, mitosis chromosome, mitosis division. And they can again choose whichever result they want to explore in more detail. So if I go for mitosis, meiosis, that's now going to search all their sessions and return 41 hits across 15 different lessons. So they've discussed mitosis and meiosis together 41 times in 15 different lessons. Here is the list of all those lessons that we can scroll through. The one at the top here is the one that has the highest number of hits, in this case 9. And then on the left-hand side here, we've got the synopsis to provide a bit of context. If I click on that, you'll see the big screen version of that. You can see, sure enough, meiosis and mitosis feature heavily. And then if I come back here, we have every mention in context in the sentence it was used with a timestamp. So I can track down which one I want to jump into, and I can click, yep, I want to be reminded of what mitosis is versus what meiosis is. Click on that result, and it's going to load straight into the playback at the exact point that we were discussing that. Now, obviously, on your side, you aren't hearing the audio that I'm hearing, but I can hear them discussing mitosis and meiosis and the difference between the two of them. So this gives the student, it really kind of unlocks the power of their lesson recordings. The recordings themselves have huge value, but only if they can be interrogated. Giving them the ability to search for anything and jump into a recording at the exact point that they're looking at something finally unlocks that value, finally elevates that online tutoring experience over and above what's possible in the home. Here's another example talking about neurotransmitters, and you can see jumps 45 minutes into this session where they're talking about how neurotransmitters are released from synapses as electrical impulses travel along an axon. And then just finally, to demonstrate a kind of bonus feature here for you as tutors, is that you can also use this functionality to search for specific resources. So if I untick the speech and untick text, I'm now searching only for resources that mention neurotransmitters. Now, for neurotransmitters, I don't have a great deal of results. All I have is this description taken from Wikipedia, talking about different types of nerve cells, and neurotransmitters obviously feature in that. But if I were to go here and say, what about that great resource I shared the other day on magnetic fields in solenoid? I can search magnetic solenoid, and sure enough, it's pulled up that resource on the magnetic field of a solenoid. I can right click, copy image, and then paste that into my Bramble notebook. Or I can jump into the session at the point we loaded that resource in and remind myself, either as the tutor or student, what was being discussed when we loaded that into the notebook. So that's how search works. What we often like to do at this stage is invite the audience to make a couple of suggestions, to see us search a few things that we haven't prepared in advance. So if you have any suggestions, please feel free to fire them into the chat box. Any kind of maths or science, really, particularly biology, chemistry, in the kind of 14 to 16 age bracket, we're likely to turn up a result for. So we got any search suggestions in the chat box, Scott?
Prime numbers?
Prime
we haven't had prime numbers before yet.
It's a new one. Prime.
Yep.
Number. There we are. 11 results across 7 different sessions. 7 is a prime number. Indeed, the universal set contains the whole numbers. This looks like a good one. Let's jump in here. Looks like a question on prime numbers. Yeah, sure enough. Set of prime numbers, set of square numbers. That's the question they're working through.
Yeah, and just to really get a context of this is like, anything else you can save lessons on, they're typically on your hard drive, on your computer, and you will just never find anything again. If you did a session 6 months ago and you recorded it and you didn't have this functionality, it would just be lost in time. You would never go back to a session 6 months ago and watch it through.
Yeah, without search, recordings aren't really that useful. I think that's something we learned last year. Well, yeah, but kind of the year before that, really. We have recordings. Students use them a little bit, but the engagement since search has been out in the wild has just gone through the roof in terms of how much people use their recordings and how much they use playback.
Yeah. So we've got a question here. I mean, is there a quick way to use resources used in previous sessions? Would you say this is the quickest way, or would you say it's using the session app and having a look for previous resources, Will?
It probably depends how many resources you've loaded into Bramble. If you've just had a handful of sessions, then when you're in the session app, you'll see there's an option to upload resources from device. So if I just load into my room here, I click upload, I've got this option to upload from sessions. And you can see, sure enough, these resources that I just brought in the last session. So I can quickly share that again and get access to it there. So that's one option by the upload resource icon. If you've got a bigger resource library and you want to go further back, then you're going to want to search your library and open up the resource that way. Right click on it, copy it, and paste it into Bramble.
And this is what I do with a lot of exam papers, everything. So, for example, if you've got some things in there and it's, from an AQA exam board, it's a biology question on mitosis or something, you can literally search for that and it'll pull up, the AQA questions that you've uploaded. It's a really fantastic resource for not having to go back and try and find things or go onto websites. Once you've uploaded them once, they're there. So you're effectively building out an asset over time.
Yes, absolutely.
I'll suggest one more suggestion maybe for science. Kinetic energy. We've got one here. Kinetic energy.
There we go. 12 hits. Oh, interesting. It's being talked about in a biological context. So what happens in this layer of sweat here is some of the liquid sweat particles have more kinetic energy because they're being heated up by your body. Let's jump in here. Sure enough, quite a nice sort of mix of biology on the right-hand side here, and then sort of physics talking about, the exchange of heat and therefore why sweating cools you down. That's a good one. We'll have to remember that one for next time, Scott.
Yeah, I was going to say, grab the good one. No, yeah, exactly. This is but
and you can see it's come up. Interesting. It's quite cool actually. It's come up in chemistry as well, and it's come up in physics too. As you might expect. It shows how many of these concepts run across subjects. And again, just another reason to be adding your subject labels makes it look very nice in the search results and makes it easy to identify those different subjects in the search results.
Yeah, exactly. And as I say, I use them for lots and lots of resources now. So did you also clarify, Will, about the fact you can just search via resources, just search via annotations? Did you go through that in terms of if you just say, for example, someone just wants to look for a particular resource and they don't want to look for any spoken words or any typing?
Yeah, so as you can see here, when I first typed in, actually let's go for heart, maybe. When I first typed in heart, I returned 296 results. This is one of the reasons we suggest students narrow it down a little bit. When I first searched, I had speech, text and resources turned on. If I turn speech off, it's going to redo that search and just return typed and resource results. Sure enough, that's cut it down to 65 hits across 18 sessions. If I turn off text, I'm now just searching resources containing the word heart, 47 hits across 15 different sessions. Many of these are past paper mark schemes or syllabus, so you can see quite a lot of kind of text content in here. But we've also got some exam paper questions. I can click on this one here, and sure enough, it's an exam talking about artificial hearts and artificial heart pumps. Any more questions on search and or recording, Scott, or have we got a few general questions to cover before we wrap up?
Okay, yeah, we've got another general one here. Can I switch to a USB webcam?
Yes, you can. You'll just need to make sure that when you're in Bramble, the camera icon in the top right, let me load back in to show you, has the right webcam selected. So I come in here now. See, when I click this icon here, it tells me which camera I'm using. Now, I only have one camera on my laptop. If you've got a built-in camera, use that. If you've got a USB plugged in, just make sure that it's selected in this drop-down menu here. The first time you select that, you might just have to reload the page to get it to recognize the camera.
Yeah, we had a couple of questions regarding session length, actually. And I know that you didn't show the infographic sometimes you show, but, there are some people suggesting that, maybe for younger children, they would have shorter sessions. But actually, we actually see a lot of longer sessions than an hour on Bramble. Was it over a third now, Will?
Yeah, let me dig out what is now very outdated data for 2019.
Yeah.
But let me pull that one out now. So this is looking at the duration of all sessions on Bramble in 2019. So you can see that, as you might expect, the majority of a single biggest block of duration is an hour. 50% of sessions are an hour long. But as Scott said, what's really nice to see is that actually 35% of sessions are over 90 minutes long, which to us says a few interesting things. One, people are obviously getting really immersed and engrossed in a lesson, which is fantastic, shows the technology just working. The other thing it sort of suggests is that actually maybe these hour-long sessions that we were shoehorning everyone into wasn't the right duration at all. Maybe an hour and a half is better. And I think one of the kind of things that online gives you is a little bit more flexibility in terms of that scheduling, because you're not having to travel between all your sessions. You can perhaps have longer sessions and experiment with session length. So we do see a real range here of different session durations. I'll have to do a new one for April because we've already gone past 31,000 hours in April already alone. So that makes 2019's 31,000 hours look a little bit twee.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, exactly. And for all of you that are really transitioning for the first time from offline tutoring to online tutoring out of necessity, you're going to find a whole plethora of benefits that come along with that. As Will mentioned, one of them, the flexibility, the absence of travel. There's just a whole bunch of benefits which are going to come along with that. So, bear with the kind of, once you've got a couple of sessions under your belt, it really gets, it's really very, very beneficial over the long term. A good question here, actually. Is there a limit on basically the number of resources you can share in a session in terms of the amount of data you can upload?
Not really, no. So the only limit that there is that your notebook cannot be more than 250 pages long. Now, practically, we would recommend that you don't really let your notebook get bigger than 100 pages, just because it means you're having to kind of download 100 pages or export 100 pages at a time. So generally, we recommend keeping it in check below 100 pages, but there's no real limit. And I mean, just to show you that, why don't I pull in that Hamlet resource that I've been harping on about again and again to show you how that works. So where's my resources folder? There it is.
And just to be clear, I often export halfway through a session if I'm switching topics or I'm switching subjects. You don't need to always export at the end of a session. Most of the time you do, but you can export if you're changing subjects and you want a different download, for example.
Yeah, so here we are. Here's that Hamlet, 144 pages. I'm going to drag and drop into the notebook. It's uploaded. Now, matter of seconds, we've got 144 pages in this notebook now. If I click the info panel, you can see I'm on page 5 of 148, and then I can use the arrow here to work through it and get to the first page of interest, and we can start adding our annotations here or jumping over here, and I can page through this endlessly now because we've got all 144 pages in there. So there isn't really a limit in how much stuff you can upload, but I would recommend kind of keeping your notebook below 100 pages just because it starts to get a touch unwieldy after that, potentially.
Okay, got a question from Anna. Can I go onto an interactive web page and share that so both me and the student can use it? We often get asked questions about the interactive web pages and some of the kind of the gamification sites as well.
Yeah, so you've kind of got a couple of different options here. So one option is to share the link. If I copy this link here and then come back into Bramble and then paste it using Command V on my Mac or Control V on Windows, you'll see that link pop up here. Scott's got that as well. I can click on that and it takes me to the web page. So if you want to share a web page with a student, that's how you can do it. If you want to bring content over from this website into Bramble, then again, screenshot comes to the rescue, enables me to grab this section of content, come back over to Bramble and paste it in to the notebook there. So that's the way that you can bring content in. You can't kind of screen share in the traditional sense, but you can bring content into the notebook. That way, there's a number of different reasons why we've chosen this shared notebook over screen share. One of the big ones is kind of pixelation, which I imagine you're all seeing right now, is that some of this stuff might not be that easy to read via the screen share layer, whereas in Bramble itself, it's crystal clear, much more bandwidth efficient. Don't have to worry about what's on my screen and all the rest. But it does mean if you do want to share stuff from another website, you either have to screenshot it or share the link.
Yeah, and of course that would have an implications on kind of the session recording. It would be very difficult, right, Will, in terms of technologically to actually have something interactive in the notebook and record that, I presume.
Yes. Yeah. The recording is a key part of it.
Okay, there's a general one here, which I'll put to you. What are the improvements you're looking to make to Bramble in the future?
It's a very good question. Needless to say, the planned roadmap somewhat went out the window a month ago when everything started changing. But actually, the kind of one of the key benefits of bringing all these new users on board is getting so much useful feedback in the here and now. We had a couple of features we were just working on finishing off on search. You'll have noticed my library here. I've got a little kind of set of suggested searches to kind of help the student engage. This is something we were working on, had put on pause, so it's only available to our kind of beta users. That's the first thing we're kind of working on getting out the door. In the session experience itself, one that's come up recently that we're quite keen to implement is we've had a number of users saying that the text tool is a little bit small sometimes, especially for those working with younger students or readers. They want the ability to type a little bit bigger. So that's something we're looking to introduce. A few other things on the session app as well, but it's kind of a bit up in the air right now, to be honest, because we're kind of responding to stuff as it comes in more than we would be under normal circumstances.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, great. Okay, one additional question here. Can pre-recorded, I think we covered that a little bit, but can pre-recorded video and demonstration lectures be uploaded? What length or size have to be used in the notebook?
So in terms of pre-uploading recorded notebooks or full kind of session recordings?
So pre-recorded video or demonstration lectures. So presumably you could certainly, if your demonstration lecture was a PDF, you could certainly upload that, right?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of bringing video content into Bramble, you can't upload video into Bramble. So again, you'd be sharing probably a link in the same way I just did, maybe to YouTube to share video content. You could pre-record an explanation on Bramble and then send that Bramble recording to a student, a kind of micro lecture on a bit of content. That is absolutely something that you could do.
Perfect. Yeah, I think that's pretty good timing. Thanks for everyone saying it's been a good session. Thanks, Will. Thanks for everyone for taking the time this evening to come on, share the time with us, learn a bit more about Bramble.
Yes, thank you all for coming along. I hope you picked up some useful stuff. Any further questions, do drop us an email at help@bramble.io. Otherwise, I hope you all enjoy the rest of your days, however long they may be, depending on where you've dialed in from today.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Have a good night.
Thanks all. Bye.
Bye.